Prince William just delivered the loudest message of his royal life. After decades of silence, he finally snapped, standing in front of cameras, eyes hollow, voice tight. He said BBC journalists lied to his mother, faked documents, manipulated her. That one interview? It shattered Diana, and it's haunted him ever since. The headlines exploded. But this wasn't just rage at the media. This was personal. A son's grief turned into a royal rebellion. And now, behind closed palace doors, William's not just speaking out, he's rewriting the rules. Because what he's about to do, no one saw coming. But William wasn't just talking, he was planning, and the palace wasn't ready for what came next. In 1995, the world leaned in as Princess Diana sat across from journalist Martin Bashir and delivered the words that would ignite headlines and define a generation. There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded. It was raw. It was vulnerable. It was heartbreaking. But what the world didn't know, what even Diana didn't fully grasp, was that this interview, the one that made her seem finally free, had been carefully engineered through deceit. Years later, investigations would uncover the disturbing truth. Bashir hadn't just asked questions. He had orchestrated a trap, using forged bank statements and fabricated threats to prey on Diana's deepest fears. He convinced her that the royal family, her staff, even her closest allies were betraying her. She had been manipulated, cornered emotionally, until she felt like the only way out was to speak. And speak she did. With poise and sorrow, Diana peeled back the curtain on royal life. She talked about isolation, depression, and her husband's lingering attachment to another woman, Camilla Parker Bowles. The world saw a woman stripped of illusions, aching for dignity. But behind her soft-spoken words was a woman pushed to the edge. The moment made headlines, but it also made Diana a target. The palace reeled. The public reeled. And for young Prince William, barely 13 at the time, it shattered the image of stability he had desperately clung to. He watched his mother be consumed by cameras, chewed up by tabloids, and paraded through the court of public opinion. What the world hailed as bravery, he saw as heartbreak. The interview redefined Diana's legacy, but it came at a cost. She never fully recovered from the firestorm. It unleashed. The media, emboldened by her openness, circled closer. The palace tightened its grip. Her vulnerabilities were no longer hidden. They were weaponized. And through it all, William watched in silence, learning too early the devastating price of truth. For years, the world remembered that interview as Diana's final act of defiance. But beneath that public defiance was something else. Betrayal so deep, it would haunt the royal family for decades. It wasn't until 2021 that the truth finally surfaced. Lord Dyson's report laid it bare. Diana had been deceived. Bashir's manipulation was calculated, and the BBC had turned a blind eye. The organization issued an apology, but the damage had long been done. Diana was gone. The trauma she endured, irreversible. And for William, the BBC's apology wasn't enough. It came too late, too hollow. What it did do, though, was ignite something in him, a long, smoldering resolve. The time for silence was over. And with that, William began reshaping how the world would remember his mother. To the public, it's just an award, another royal ceremony wrapped in applause and handshakes. But for Prince William, the Diana Award isn't a ritual. It's a mission, a battlefield, a fight to preserve the truth about the woman who gave him life, then lost hers to the machine that never let her breathe. Created in 1999, 2 years after Diana's tragic death, the award was meant to keep her spirit alive, not through statues or headlines, but through action. It recognized young people who embodied what Diana stood for: compassion, bravery, and the strength to speak up when the world tells you to stay silent. For years, the award carried on quietly, honoring students, activists, and leaders who fought bullying, injustice, and loneliness, the very things Diana herself once battled in private. But after the BBC scandal exploded in 2021, something inside William shifted. The public apology might have settled scores for journalists and executives, but it reopened every wound he thought had scarred over. His mother wasn't just misrepresented. She was manipulated, cornered, and sacrificed. And the world had clapped as it happened. So William made a decision. He would no longer let protocol decide how his mother was remembered. He would do it himself. And it began with the one thing still untainted by scandal, the Diana Award. No more rubber-stamped guest lists, no more obligatory appearances. If this was truly about Diana, then every detail had to honor her, not the monarchy, not the press, not the legacy of anyone else. By the time the 25th anniversary of the award approached in 2024, William had immersed himself fully. He wasn't just reading speeches. He was reading every nominee's story. He sat with advisors, challenging their selections, asking for more details, not just about achievements, but about heart. He wanted to know what these young people stood for, what they'd risked, what they'd lost, because in their courage, he saw flickers of the woman who once walked through landmine fields, who embraced AIDS patients when others recoiled, who looked into the eyes of the forgotten and made them feel seen. Diana's soul didn't live in palaces or portraits. It lived in these kids. Some recipients had stood up to school systems that failed them. Others launched programs for mental health awareness after losing siblings to suicide. A few had faced violence, racism, even exile, but they kept going. And William took it all in, not as a royal, but as a son. He made sure their stories were centered, their voices amplified. The 2024 ceremony, he vowed, would be hers not by title, but by spirit. No politics, no distractions, just a mother's legacy reflected in those who carried her light forward. Every choice, from the video tributes to the guest list, was made with painstaking care. Because William knew what was at stake. One wrong move, one wrong presence, and the purity of the moment would be lost. But one name on the guest list threatened to unravel everything he was trying to protect. Before Diana married Charles, there was Camilla. And for William, that story was never forgotten. It wasn't a rumor or some whispered scandal. Camilla had always been there, lurking in the corners of his family's broken fairy tale. Charles and Camilla's romance didn't begin in secret. It began openly, long before Diana ever walked through the palace gates. They were close, inseparable even, in the early 1970s. But when Charles left for the Navy, Camilla didn't wait. She married Andrew Parker Bowles, a man she could depend on, while Charles returned to a throne and a heart still tethered to someone already taken. The royal machinery, always hungry for perfection, stepped in with a plan. Diana was young, beautiful, and naive enough to believe in the fantasy they offered her. But Charles wasn't just marrying a princess, he was burying his feelings for another woman. And that was a wound that never healed. Diana walked into that marriage blind to the history she was stepping into. From the outside, it looked like a dream. The blushing bride, the glittering wedding, the eyes of the world locked on a fairy tale. But behind the grandeur was a quiet agony. Diana wasn't just isolated, she was invisible. Her husband's heart had never been hers to begin with. The more she tried to connect, the more he pulled away. Every distance he created, every cold silence had a name behind it: Camilla. And Diana, no matter how hard she smiled, could feel it in her bones. Her pain was private for years, masked by royal appearances and media flashes, but it reached a boiling point in 1989. At a birthday party thrown by Camilla's sister, Diana did the unthinkable. She walked straight into the den of betrayal and confronted Camilla directly. Calm but burning, Diana looked her in the eyes and delivered the line that would echo forever. "There were 3 of us in this marriage, so it was a bit crowded." Camilla's response? Emotionless, chilling. "You have 2 wonderful boys." It wasn't just a brush-off, it was a wound disguised as civility. That moment wasn't just a confrontation, it was an emotional fracture, one that didn't just split 2 women, but set fire to a royal illusion. And at the center of it all, 2 young boys watched their mother slowly unravel. William, still a child, was beginning to understand that fairy tales lie. He saw the pain, the confusion, the humiliation his mother endured. And more than that, he saw the face of the woman who caused so much of it. That kind of heartbreak doesn't fade. It imprints itself. So as the years passed and the world moved on, William didn't forget. He carried it with him through every royal duty, every photo op, every time Camilla stood beside his father. He played the part, smiled when expected, nodded when tradition demanded it. But inside, the memories never dulled. By the time of the 2024 ceremony, those memories weren't just history, they were raw and unresolved. Inside Kensington Palace, something was missing from the royal guest list, and that silence was intentional. The 25th anniversary of the Diana Award wasn't going to be like the ones before it. This time, William wasn't just attending, he was orchestrating every detail. From the layout of the hall to the order of speeches, from the video tributes to the list of honorees, nothing escaped his scrutiny. But one element became the quiet storm behind it all. The question of Camilla. Her name, printed on draft of the guest list, hovered like a shadow over every planning session. To include her would be traditional, expected, a signal of royal unity. But to William, it risked desecrating everything the night stood for. He wasn't just planning a ceremony, he was protecting sacred ground. Every meeting became a balancing act: respect versus resolve, diplomacy versus emotion. William wasn't loud about it. There was no confrontation, no fiery speeches. But his silence was pointed. His edits to the list were deliberate. Every time Camilla's name appeared, it vanished just as quickly. He didn't need to explain. Those closest to him understood. This wasn't about animosity. It was about boundaries, about keeping the night pure. He'd watched his mother suffer quietly for years, and now he was doing the opposite. He was reclaiming that silence and turning it into control. There would be no awkward glances, no press headlines comparing two women who should never have been linked. The story would belong to Diana, and only Diana. As the event drew closer, the weight of the decision deepened. Within the palace, whispers began to circulate. Courtiers exchanged glances. Senior aides tiptoed around the topic. It was unprecedented. Camilla had slowly carved out her space in the royal world, and many believed she had earned her seat at the table. But this wasn't a table she had helped set. The ceremony wasn't about royal reconciliation. It was about grief, memory, and the enduring strength of a woman who never got her justice. And William made sure every corner of that room would echo with her voice, not be dulled by old tensions. There was no announcement, no press release. The exclusion was never confirmed, only felt. Behind the scenes, seating charts were revised. Royal traditions, those rigid, polished routines, were softened or quietly ignored. The guest list, once finalized, was locked without Camilla's name. It was a decision made not in malice, but in mourning. William didn't need applause for it. He just needed peace. Every move he made was a son's rebellion disguised as royal planning. And when the final week arrived, the palace braced for impact, not from a scandal, but from a truth too emotional to be denied. When the ceremony day arrived, everyone waited, but one absence said everything. The 25th Diana Awards were filled with light. Speeches flowed, applause echoed. Stories of young heroes moved the audience to tears. But through all the celebration, one shadow loomed larger than any tribute or memory. Camilla was not there, and that absence, unspoken, unexplained, hung over the event like a question no one dared ask out loud. Her chair wasn't empty because it had never been set. William's silent decision had already reshaped the entire atmosphere. It wasn't a snub, it was a statement. And as the night unfolded, every guest, every journalist, every royal insider knew it. Something fundamental had shifted within the monarchy. The media picked it up instantly. Whispers became headlines. Speculation exploded. Why wasn't Camilla invited? Was it personal? Political? Or something deeper, something raw and unresolved from decades past? Royal correspondents debated it on live broadcasts, while tabloids ran photos of the event framed around the one person who wasn't there. And yet, inside the room, there was no chaos. William and Catherine were poised, warm, gracious. They moved through the crowd with quiet elegance, never addressing the storm outside, but never needing to. Their calm presence was its own kind of power, a message that the evening belonged to Diana, and no one else. Even within royal circles, the IBB reactions were split. Some admired the strength of William's conviction. Others worried about the message it sent. King Charles, always a figure of tradition, offered no public response. His silence was just as loud as his son's decision. Prince Harry, wrapped in his own complicated life across the Atlantic, did not attend either, though a pre-recorded message was played in his name. Still, it was William's presence that carried the room. It was clear from the moment he stepped up to the podium this was more than a duty. This was personal. The kind of personal the crown rarely shows. His speech didn't attack, but it didn't hold back either. He spoke of his mother with a depth that cracked the formal shell of the event. He spoke of her compassion, her pain, and the enduring fight to keep her memory honest. He praised the young award recipients, drawing parallels between their courage and Diana's resilience. But between the lines, there was something else, a quiet defiance. Every word he spoke was layered with meaning. He didn't mention Camilla. He didn't have to. The absence said more than words ever could. And the audience felt it. The applause wasn't just for the honorees, it was for the son who had finally drawn a line in the sand. But the silence around Camilla was not the end. It was the beginning of a new royal reckoning. To the world, it was a guest list change. To the royal family, it was a warning shot. Prince William's quiet omission of Camilla from the Diana Awards ceremony may have looked subtle on the surface, but inside palace walls, it landed like a bombshell. Royal events thrive on tradition, predictability, unity, symbolism. But William didn't care about appearances this time. He cared about truth. He knew exactly what it would mean to exclude his stepmother from the event. He knew how the press would frame it. He knew the ripple it would cause within a monarchy obsessed with balance. And still, he moved forward, because for once, emotional truth outweighed royal diplomacy. It wasn't about making a scene. It was about drawing a line. This wasn't rebellion for the sake of headlines. It was something deeper. William was no longer playing the part of the composed heir, silently absorbing decades of royal tension. He had watched the system bury his mother's truth under layers of pageantry. He had stayed quiet through Camilla's rise, through her careful public redemption, through years of family discomfort. But the Diana Awards were sacred ground, and William decided that on this one day, the palace would not decide who belonged. He would. In that moment, protocol didn't matter. History did. Pain did. And by choosing emotion over etiquette, William shifted the center of royal gravity. Inside the palace, the tension was palpable. There were no confrontations, no explosive arguments, but silence can be louder than shouting. Camilla's absence may not have been acknowledged in words, but it sat in every corner of that room. Charles, stuck between the legacy of one woman and the loyalty to another, remained silent. But he felt it. The invisible barrier between father and son had never been more defined. William wasn't being cruel. He was being honest. And that honesty was uncomfortable. For the institution, for his family, and for the future they were trying to protect. Outside the palace, the public reaction told a different story. Social media overflowed with praise. Commentators called it brave. Royal watchers called it overdue. Polls showed a sharp rise in support for William, especially among younger generations. The media spun narratives ranging from respectful boundary setting to cold family division. But one thing was clear across the board. The monarchy was no longer functioning on autopilot. William had disrupted the machine. He had inserted raw emotion into an institution built on restraint, and people were watching closely. What the world witnessed wasn't just a son honoring his mother. It was a future king redefining what leadership looks like. Not polished, not rehearsed, but human. With that single choice, William forced a reckoning inside the royal household, one that couldn't be solved with tradition or silenced by duty. Because the message had been sent, and beneath it all, William's transformation as a leader had already begun. For years, Diana's story was told by others, spun by tabloids, dissected by biographers, softened by the palace, and hijacked by headlines. Her voice, fragile and fierce, was often buried beneath the noise. But now, her son is writing the final chapter with truth as his sword. Prince William isn't shouting. He isn't demanding retribution. He's simply refusing to let the world forget who she really was. In every calculated decision, in every quiet omission, in every heartfelt tribute, William is doing what the crown never could. He's honoring Diana not as an institution, but as a mother. A human being who loved fiercely, hurt deeply, and deserved more than the cold machinery of royalty gave her. He's not out for revenge in the way tabloids might hope. His revenge is something far more powerful: remembrance. That protective love for Diana has shaped William in ways few ever fully understood. As a child, he watched the media rip his mother apart, piece by piece, exploiting her vulnerability, then praising her grace with the same breath. He learned early that compassion and cruelty often wear the same face. So when he speaks of mental health, of kindness, of empathy, he's not following a script. He's healing. Every cause he champions, every young life he lifts through the Diana Award, echoes his mother's values. But it also draws a line: never again. Never again will the press write her story without accountability. Never again will protocol come before pain. Never again will the crown forget that beneath the title was a woman who bled. And now, in this new royal era, William is redefining leadership not through armor, but through authenticity. He is not ashamed of emotion, he leads with it. He is not afraid of grief, he carries it like a banner. He has rejected the sterile silence that once defined the monarchy and chosen a path filled with sincerity, vulnerability, and truth. In doing so, he's not just rewriting Diana's legacy, he's rebuilding the public's faith in the royal family. For a generation that grew up watching his mother fall, he is rising in her name, reminding them that legacy isn't built on ceremony. It's built on courage, and his message is clear: compassion will always matter more than tradition. In Redefining, Eyes of the World, Diana is no longer a scandal, no longer a tragedy, no longer a fractured fairy tale. She is the foundation upon which William stands. Her pain has become his strength. Her silence, his voice, her memory, his mission. And in the most poetic twist of fate, it is through her son, not her title, that Diana finally claims the justice she was denied in life. William's legacy is no longer just his own. It is hers, burning brighter with every choice he makes. And the question no one can ignore now is, will this emotional leadership style define the future of the crown itself? What happens when the heir to the throne stops following royal rules and starts following his heart? Prince William has answered that question not with press conferences, but with quiet choices that speak louder than any proclamation. He has stepped into the role of future king not as a replica of the men who came before him, but as the son of a woman who broke every rule and paid the price. The Diana Award wasn't just a ceremony, it was a declaration, a shift, a sign that the monarchy is no longer being led solely by tradition, but by truth. William isn't erasing the old ways, he's evolving them, and the public has taken notice. No longer is William seen as just the polished royal in a tailored suit. He's a father, a husband, a grieving son who grew up beneath the crushing weight of headlines and heartbreak. And because of that, he leads differently. Where previous generations stayed silent, William speaks with empathy, with conviction, with humanity. Where they distance themselves from public pain, he leans into it, drawing strength from his scars. And in doing so, he's doing what few believed possible, making the monarchy feel real again. Younger generations, once detached from the idea of royalty, now see a leader who resembles them not in lifestyle, but in feeling. He has become a bridge between history and progress, between legacy and change. That bridge is built on Diana's foundation. Her influence runs through everything he does, from his mental health campaigns to his environmental work, to the way he parents his children with gentleness instead of duty. He's not playing a part, he's reshaping it. And in doing so, he's proving that compassion isn't weakness, it's strength. His refusal to include Camilla in the Diana Awards was not an act of division, but of emotional clarity. He didn't do it to spark drama. He did it to preserve sacred space, to send a message that some memories deserve protection, even from the ones who claim to love them now. That decision was bold. And yes, it was personal, but it was also leadership. Camilla, to her credit, understood. She didn't fight it. She didn't demand inclusion. And that quiet acceptance said more than 1,000 interviews could. King Charles, meanwhile, continued his delicate balancing act supporting his wife, yet knowing his son's choice had already been made. What emerged wasn't a family torn apart, but a monarchy at a crossroads. Emotion is no longer a liability. It's the new foundation, and William has made it clear. He will carry that crown not only on his head, but in his heart. Prince William may not have spoken loud, but his decision echoed across generations. What do you think? Was he right to protect his mother's memory this way? Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.